Hi, I'm Robert Begley. Come with me back in time to the 1960s in Richmond, Virginia. Three teenage boys see a private airplane and they decide, let's take it for a ride. They take off, each one takes their turn at the wheel, then they realize we're out of gas. What should we do? How about we land over there in a Civil War battlefield? Fortunately, they didn't get into too much trouble. In fact, the owner of the plane didn't press any charges. So, what happened to these three teenagers? To my knowledge, two of them had careers as pilots. The third one, my friend Sidney, soared even higher. Fast forward to Pittsburgh in 2017. I'm working at a philosophy conference, and my dearest Carrie Ann and I decide to have coffee with a friend at a couple of blocks away from the hotel. And when we arrive, I see a distinguished looking man with glasses, graying hair, sitting there, engaged in deep thought. And because he had the same kind of badge that I had, I knew he was at the conference. So I go a little closer and I see his name. I say, "Are you the Sidney Gunst? Sweetie, come over here. This is the guy who funded the Objective Standard and the Ayn Rand Institute, Washington, D.C. office. You're my hero. Can I shake your hand?" Have you ever met a hero and you're not quite sure how they'll react? They could be snobbish, they could be drunk, or anything else. Not Sidney. He was warm and gracious, shook my hand, and the rest of the conference, we got to know each other well. The next winter, Carrion and I drove from New York all the way down to Key West, and I told her first stop is going to be visiting Sidney. Where does he live? A place called Midlothian, Virginia. Sounds like it's right out of Lord of the Rings. And when we get there, we meet his lovely wife, Sheila, his son, Sidney, and the general of the house, this little terrier dog who is barking up a storm. Sidney, what's the dog's name? Sherman. Wait a minute. You live 15 minutes from the capital of the Confederacy and you name your dog Sherman? I love it. So he brought us to the Innsbruck Corporate Center, which he had developed. He told us about his career as a real estate developer, and we just had a wonderful time. A couple of months later, I was giving a presentation in the Washington, D.C. area. I was talking about Wall Street heroes. And at one point during the question and answer period, someone asked me a specific banking question, and I was stumped. And the tension is rising in the room because there's silence. All of a sudden, in the back of the room, Sidney describes this answer that was like pulling a string. And I felt like starting to take notes. And I'm thinking, man, how much more does this guy know? Um, the following year, the first Objective Standard had they had a conference called TOSCon, and it was going to be in Richmond, Virginia. And I told Carrie Ann, I was like, "Yeah, we could stay at the hotel, but if Sidney and Sheila will host us, I prefer that." And they were gracious enough to do so. The conference was a big success. And one morning we woke up and went down to his basement, and we see all of these newspaper clippings. I'm like, "Sidney, you did a triathlon? So did I. Wait a minute. You rode a bicycle across the entire United States? That's on my bucket list." Just learning more and more about his achievements was like a kid in front of a massive bunch of gifts on Christmas morning. That's how I kind of felt in his presence. Well, he was also intensely curious about ideas, and specifically Aristotle's ideas. And because Carrion is a scholar, they would engage, and it was just for me, it was wonderful to see that interaction. Then he told us about some projects he was working on, monuments, in Richmond to kind of tell the real story of the past. Now, one thing that got to him was how much the regulatory agencies they really just thwarted his creativity, and he felt like he spent so much time dealing with bureaucrats who were not good at anything except preventing him from creating and building. And this clearly bothered me as well. Didn't get to see him until this past summer. Well, a couple of years went by, and we saw him at another TOSCon outside of Boston. And once again, I was working, so I didn't have that much time to socialize. You know, we passed, chat, say a couple of words. And then finally, the morning of the last day of the conference, I said, Sidney, we're sitting together. At the closing banquet, we're going to sit together. Sure enough, when we arrive, all the main area tables are filled up. So we find one way in the back behind a column, and we're having a good time, but I had no idea that the organizers of the event were going to pay tribute to him, special tribute to him, which he fully deserved. And I thought, Sidney, you should be right in the middle of this room right now. But he shrugged it off. He was humble in that way. And the last interaction I had with him was in September when I was running an online course for the Objective Standard Institute. And I invited him and Lori to attend the course. And he was there. He wasn't very active, but I made sure that the students knew if he didn't do what he did 15 years ago, we probably wouldn't be here. So this last Monday was like any other Monday for me. I got up around 5 a.m., corresponded with coworkers in the UK, had a long day of work, and then 7 p.m. I go to ballet class, and I come back. I'm feeling so good about the class, and when I arrive, about 9 p.m., I see my dearest is in tears, and she tells me, I just read on Facebook, Sidney Gunst died. What? Sidney? And I start making some phone calls, and his dear friend Lori calls me back and shares the sad news with us. Well, we had only known Sidney personally for 4 years, and there are a lot of people who knew him a lot longer, and our pain is like this compared to theirs. Our hearts go out to them, especially his wife's Sheila. So one tradition I have since being raised in a large Catholic family is to light a candle when somebody dear passes away. But also I want to conclude by having my dearest Carrie Ann join me in raising a glass, and we say, here's to a life fully lived. Thank you, Sidney, for your friendship.